Hey everyone, it's Kristen from WEGO Health. Thank you so much for joining us. I am the Patient Leader Network Coordinator, and I can't wait for the webinar we have in store for you tonight. Bob Demarco will be hosting the webinar. He has his own blog, the Alzheimer's Reading Room, which is a very successful blog, which is why he has won the 2016 WEGO Health Awards Best in Show Blog Award earlier in December. So we're super excited to have him tonight. He'll be sharing some pro tools for health bloggers to share his own experiences and his own insights as to what he's learned and how you can get your blog to where his is today. Without further ado, I present to you Bob Demarco.
Or accidental blogger. My mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2004, and after a period of about 18 months of enormous hardship, I started to get my act together, and as it turned out, I had the perfect education and life experience to be an Alzheimer's caregiver. I started having really good success with my mother, but I don't want to mislead you, not with her memory, but with her social skills and her ability to do things and the way she acted. And this started to get noticed. People started to call me, and I have to thank, if he's out there tonight, my good buddy Tony Polk, because he was the person. I met him from my blog, and he was the person that told me, you have to write more about what you're doing with your mom, and he kept telling me that. And then on July 9th, I think it was 2009, as soon as I got off the phone with him, I wrote my first article in that direction, and it was called Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So once I got going, I was just very fortunate. I got a lot of good feedback. I got calls from Harvard and Duke and UCLA and some other places, and that really energized me to do what I was doing. So that's how I got started. It takes a while if you're a blogger. You have to stick with it. There's no doubt about that. But over time, it can be really rewarding. And now I'm going to start talking specifically about the pro blogger tips that I've decided to use tonight. Most of what you're going to be hearing from me in this presentation has to do with what I call developing a winning mindset. And you have to develop a mindset if you want to be a successful blogger. You have to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, where you're going, and you have to get it all organized in your brain. This is really critical, and as new bloggers call me or I meet people, I have a series of questions. You're going to see some of them in here, and they just can't answer them, and you really need to be able to answer certain questions if you're going to be successful. So you can see this is a long one. Your brain is like your stomach. Average-wise, most of us have about 20,000 thoughts each day, and what you're thinking about determines how you think and how you feel. So if you think positively, you're going to be a positive person. If you think a lot of negative thoughts, you're going to be a negative person. And the brain itself is very plastic. Most people don't know this. It has a lot of plasticity. So in fact, while most people say it's hard to change, it's actually easy to change if you become totally goal-oriented. Your brain will come along with you. So always think about that. What you feed your brain determines how you think and feel. This determines the kind of attitude you have, and it determines what you believe in. So the first question I ask is, do you believe in yourself? And you really have to have a strong belief in yourself, in my opinion, if you want to be a successful blogger. And since I think everybody that's here tonight, or for the most part, is in the health arena, you really have to believe what you're doing is going to bring value, not only to yourself, but to the people that you're going to try to get connected to your blog. So here's the first big key, in my opinion, if you want to be a winner. In order to win, you have to have an easy to understand, believable vision statement. A great vision statement consists of one single sentence. I ask everybody, can you tell me your vision? And they go blah, 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 blah. That is not a vision. You have to reduce your vision into a simple sentence. So, for example, when I started, the goal of the Alzheimer's Reading Room, I think, was relatively simple. my goal and the goal of the blog was to help caregivers understand, cope, and communicate with the person living with dementia. And those are three separate things, and I started writing about them separately. I would say today, as time has gone on and my mother's no longer with me, I would say our vision really is we help caregivers live a better life. When I use the term caregiver, that includes people who are caring for their loved one at home, or if they're in some type of assisted living facility or memory care facility, but it also includes dementia professionals, professors and nurses in memory centers and universities that deal hands-on with caregivers. So it's more of a generic term. You can be at home or a professional, and that is our focus, because over time, the blog went from being almost all at-home caregivers. We have lots of researchers in every major university that like to read and get some ideas about how caregivers are feeling. So we have scientists, research people. We have a lot of people in assisted living and adult daycare. And I would say more recently, I'm starting to get a lot of readers that are in assisted living facilities, and more likely than not, they're working in the memory care unit. And I'm pretty happy about that, because we're not as far along, in my opinion, in those types of places as we need to be. But we've come a long way, and it's getting better all the time. So what is a vision statement? You look ahead. You're creating a vision with your vision statement. Where are you going? What do you want to happen? You'll have to have a vision statement to do that. So in a sense, a vision statement outlines your one major goal, and you have to have one major goal. Your vision statement should be inspirational both for you and your audience. So when I say we help caregivers understand, cope, and communicate, that is very meaningful to me. I took care of my mother for 8.5 years, 3,112 days. And during that period, I was with her all but 22 days. So I know what it's like to be a caregiver, because I was one. And I know what it feels like. So I tried to make everything I do inspirational, because I know how difficult it could be. So what I'm saying to you, my sense was, it wasn't real difficult, because what I intended to do once I got going was part of what I already was doing. And then I just basically wanted to inspire my mom mainly. And then I wanted to inspire other caregivers. It should be aspirational. You have to aspire to do something on your blog. And it was a bit of a moving target, obviously, for me. But you really have to think about the concept of being aspirational in what you do. You have to give it thought. In my case, I like to write things down, so I have notebooks, and I also have these great big pads that I write on. And I find it's very helpful in developing your vision and then where you want to go with it. I think it is extremely helpful if you write down things, rewrite them, and then actually try to get your vision. I'm going to talk about mission in a second, and other things all on one piece of paper, very simple bullet points. Because if you're going to blog every day or 3 times a week, whatever your goal is, you're going to find there's days when you need to give yourself a little bit of inspiration. Although I'm fortunate in the sense, I have a lot of readers. I have 30,900 subscribers, and those are real subscribers, because one of the things about the Alzheimer's Reading Room, a lot of people don't know, if you sign up to receive the newsletter and you don't read it for 17 straight days, it kicks you off. But I don't tell people that. In other words, you're suspended and you're off. I know some people notice it because they come back and they say, I was on your list, I'm not getting your emails anymore. I look in and I say, yeah, you're not on because you haven't been reading it. I don't tell them that. I tell them you're back on, and I just put a sentence in, make sure you read. Make sure you keep reading. I already kind of covered this in what I just said. Your vision statement needs to be motivational, but it really has to be in your brain, crisp and clear, because you're going to need a lot of motivation. Skipping back to the idea of what I was trying to make about having subscribers, which is one of the most important things you need to do, is your subscribers will write to you, or they'll write in the comments, and they, of course, when you get comments and emails, it can be very motivational, but they'll motivate you to write about certain topics. I have to admit, in my case, I get too many emails. It's hard for me to keep going on that front, but I read every one of them. Unfortunately, I'm no longer able to respond to every one of them, but if people are looking for a certain kind of information, I can go in the search function on the blog, and I can pick out some things that'll help them accomplish what they want to do. So as you're developing your blog, and by the way, you don't have to do every one of these things. You have to do the vision, but you don't have to do every one of these things all at once, because as you evolve, as you kind of undergo a metamorphosis, the answers to some of these questions here are going to change. But I always ask people, and they can't necessarily give me a good answer. Who are you going to help? Everybody with chronic pain? Probably too big for something like a blog, unless you have a big budget and you can really get a lot of writers or something like that. You have to come down. In my case, it was very simple. My mother was diagnosed with probable Alzheimer's. I wanted to bring to her the best life possible. That was a real struggle at the very beginning, but then I started to get the hang of it. So I knew I was going to help my mom to have a better life. And the best part about it was, the more I helped her, the better my life was. So it can kind of go around, in a circle when you're doing this. What is your purpose? What are you intending to accomplish? And in a minute, I'm going to get in a section talking about purpose. Do you want to change the world? How are you going to do it if you're going to change the world? Most likely, if you're like me, I had no budget. So I basically had a free blog. Eventually, I paid for a custom URL. I'm a pretty smart guy, and I'll give you one tip in here that you might like. I pay $12 a year for my blog and for my URL, for my domain name. $12 a year, that's $1 a month. A lot of people pay a lot more than that. I figured that all out at the beginning, and I was lucky about that. What are you actually going to provide on your blog, and who you're providing to? After I was going for about a year, I put up a poll and asked people what information they like. And this is a typical example. If you don't ask, you really won't ever learn anything. I was shocked that 40% of the readers said they were interested in research information. What's going on in research and science? They wanted to know more about that. And I was putting that up every once in a while, but then I started to think about it, and then I started realizing, if there is ongoing research, even if it's far away to a drug, to a clinical trial or a drug, at least a caregiver gets a sense that there's people working on the problem and the issue, and that there is hope. So here's a tip in between these tips. I started subscribing to some of these, and some that give you free. For example, if you're looking for an idea what to write about, or if you're looking for research, I'm pretty sure both. I'm not sure about this one. I've been in there so long. Newswise, I think they'll give you the information anyway. So it's newswise.com. You go in, you can search. I put in Alzheimer's or dementia. You could put in whatever you want, and you'll be surprised. There's stuff going on all around the world, and you can actually, if you want to, in some cases, it'll say at the bottom after you read about somebody that's doing research, you might be able to call them, or you might be able to call somebody in their media room, and you might be able to get an interview if you're interested in doing that on your blog, where you can definitely always get some extra information one way or the other. Another one that I use is Eureka Alert, and then the science part of Eureka Alert. So if you go to Eureka Alert, you'll see they have different categories. Go into science, try to find some information. Eureka Alert, Newswise, and I have a subscription to the JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association. It's free, and they'll let you look at their information, and you can republish their information. and repurpose it. Now I'm down to what is your ultimate goal? And I'm asking all of these things here as trick questions. What is your ultimate goal? Can you tell me that? Most people want to get a big blog. That's pretty much what they want to do. What's your purpose? To get a big blog. What is your ultimate goal? To get a big blog. Well, you know, that's all fine and dandy, but there's a lot of things you're going to need to do before that starts happening. So, to put it in a kind of a nutshell here, your vision statement provides a glimpse into the future. It provides you with some guidance and inspiration each day. I want to help caregivers, so I think about that. And your vision statement is the North Star that allows you to always be moving in the right direction. You have to know where you're going all the time. And when you get busy, if you're working and you're a blogger, or if you're doing this and you're a blogger, you know, it's hard to focus in on one thing. In my particular case, I was a full-time at-home caregiver for my mom, which, let me tell you, was a big job. But I was actually working with Alzheimer's at the same time I decided to start blogging about Alzheimer's, and that was helpful. So it wasn't like I was going to work. I worked on Wall Street for a long time before I took care of my mom, you know, and doing that, and then coming home and having to shift gears. I was in that mindset all the time. Now, a second thing you need to have a mission. And here's the thing. Mission is not the same thing as vision, and many people get confused about this. Mission relates specifically to what you're going to do to fulfill your vision. So they're two separate things. And I've always found that it's good to have, you know, let's say what I call an immediate goal. What do you need to do now? I always tell people, now. What do you need to do now? What are you doing now? It's always now. Think about that. It's now. It's always now. So you have to be able to do, you know what you're going to do right now, but you also need to develop some short-term and longer-term goals so that you can get a better idea as you're trying to accomplish your mission, how you're going to evolve and where you're going to go to. Some of this comes to you so you can change your mission, because once you have readers, you start to get feedback. In my case, sometimes what I was doing I found was right on, and other times I found my readers wanting something totally different. You know, I had my own preconceived notions, but I also had my own life experience, my experience with my mom, and my career experience, you know, and that led me to my perception of things. But I found out that there were people that had a totally different perspective than I had. So, as you're developing your mission, the kinds of things you're going to do now, each day, over time, you need to think of all the practical things to do each day. And as I said, you're going to turn your vision into reality. So I ask myself all the time, did I help caregivers understand how to understand, cope, and communicate with a person living with dementia? No doubt about it. And today, am I helping caregivers live a better life because I have a different tweak on this? I'm not a caregiver right now. And the answer is absolutely yes. You have to ask yourself, and you have to be honest with yourself. What am I accomplishing? And am I accomplishing my vision? If not, you need to tweak what you're doing. So, in a nutshell, just like I'm saying, what do you do? How do you do it? How's it going to help others? Who is your audience, and what do they need? Now, who is your audience? You really need to give considerable thought to who your audience is. In my case, I really honestly didn't know who my audience was in the beginning. But at the beginning, I decided it was caregivers. But then I started to get calls from guys like Rudy Tanzi at Harvard, and he was interested in what I was doing from a research and science perspective, and so on and so forth. And then over time, I started to think about adult day services, memory care facilities. So I was branching out and expanding my audience. But you need to start with a clearly focused audience. Now, here's what happened to me. I got a call from a woman at UCLA, and she read an article that I wrote, and she wanted to know if she could have the permission to print that article and give it out in support groups. Pay close attention here. So of course I said, yeah. And it turned out she was the super moderator of support group facilitators, and they had 12 of them all around the Los Angeles area and outside Los Angeles. This is UCLA. So she prints this article out, and a couple things happened that I couldn't believe. The first thing was about a week or 10 days goes by, and I get this giant email from a woman out in LA, and she's telling me that she got my article in a support group, and she just started crying, and she was glad she was with people that understood it, and she couldn't stop crying. The article was entitled, "Are Alzheimer's Caregivers the Forgotten?" And the theme of the article is, "Are Alzheimer's Caregivers Abandoned?" So for her, it made a major impact, because now, as she read through the article, she realized that it's quite common that it happens to us and that she wasn't alone. So what I'm trying to say here is that was one part of it, and certainly that had an impact on me. But here's the other thing. So I called the woman up and I said to her, "How did you find my article anyway?" And she said, "Oh, I was searching in Google." I said, "Okay." And she said, "I see you're writing some more good stuff." I said, "Look, if you want anything, just go ahead and print it. I don't have a problem, if you want to give it out." And I gave her carte blanche. So I got on Google search and I started searching for my article. It was on the 13th page of the Google search. So you're talking 10 articles, 10 articles, 10 articles. You can do the math. So you might write something, and you might not get an immediate response, even especially if you're a smaller blogger. But down the road, you might be surprised what happens. I have 2 articles that have been read over 2 million times. I have an article that I wrote under my mother's name after she went to heaven, but I wrote it for her. That has over 41,000 shares on Facebook. So, as you're trying to figure out, what to do and what you're going to do, just try to put your stuff out there in a vein that you're going to try to help others. The last one on the screen you see is, what do they need? Not what do they want. What do they need? There's a big difference in life between what we want and what we need. For example, very simple. This is using your brain. You might want ice cream. Whether you get it or not, it doesn't matter. If you get it, great. You might feel good and feel happy for a while. If you don't get it, you might feel sad for a while, but it'll go away. You do need oxygen. We all need oxygen. So there's the difference between wanting something and needing something. You have to give this considerable thought. There's a big difference between what you want, what you need, and there's certainly a big need between what your audience wants and what they need. And by the way, when I was talking about abandonment, I've talked to people that are doing things totally different than me. And the whole idea that people get abandoned when they have a chronic illness is not that uncommon, but it's really vicious in Alzheimer's disease. Okay. Read this one close, write it down, get a big picture made up, put it on your wall. When I come to your blog for the first time, can I understand what it is all about in the first 15 seconds I'm there? If not, bye-bye. You've got to get the hook in your reader. Now, when you go to my blog, it might look a little clunky because it's old style at first, but I'll tell you what, at the very top, there's no image. There's just the words in big letters, Alzheimer's Reading Room. So you have a good idea where you are. I don't have my vision on there. I have a slightly different thing on the first line. And as you come down, you get right into the content so you can see where I'm going. So the next section I'm going to switch to here is the importance of meaning and purpose in life and in blogging, and they kind of tend to overlap. So this is my quote, and I've written about this extensively, about purpose and meaning. It's important to me, and I think it should be to everybody. There is a difference between success and purposefulness. It's a hard word to say. Success is what happens to you. Purpose is what happens through you. Meaning is what you give away to others. This applies to blogging. So it's kind of upside down there, success. if you want success, you're going to have to do something first. So if you're thinking specifically about, I'm going to start this blog and everybody's going to come, you can pretty much forget about it for most of you. I mean, I waited a long time for the good stuff to start happening. And you have to basically first address purpose. What's going to happen through you? You write something, somebody sends you an email. I just got a great email today, actually. I have this article about how to get an Alzheimer's patient to take their medication. This is one of the biggest problems going. And I have a very simple solution to it. A woman took a variation on the theme that I describe on how to do it. And she said she sat next to her mom, who would constantly, every day, refuse to take her medication. She put the pill in her hand, and she sat next to her mom and just started talking to her about stuff. And after a while, her mother said, "Is that mine?" And she said, "Yeah." And her mother reached over, put it in her mouth, and took a drink of water. So these are the kind of things that can happen through your effort. And then you get the meaningfulness, and this is what you're giving away. And again, in my case, I was very fortunate. I had a great family, a great upbringing, great education, great work experience and life experience, and it all melded together. And then there I was. Now I became first an Alzheimer's caregiver and then an Alzheimer's blogger. You have to give this some thought. Now this applies to my audience, and it probably applies to your potential office. It is my belief if Alzheimer's caregivers will open their mind along with their heart, they can come to only one main conclusion. They are leading a meaningful and purposeful life. Aha. They are leading. Most caregivers never realize this. Imagine something. You're going to take care of a person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the average is 8 years for a Alzheimer's caregiver. And what could be more meaningful and purposeful in your life than taking care of a person that needs you so much? But very few caregivers see it this way. Point. If you can help your audience understand, purposefulness and meaning in their life, depending on how it relates to you and how it might relate to them, you'll really be opening the eyes of people and you'll be making a very big difference. So we all have to think about purpose in our lives. So how do people become bloggers, or what's really going on out there? When a crisis occurs in our life, we often seek a greater participation in life. That certainly happened to me, and that applies to me. Sometimes you start to embrace yourself and you have something deeply inside of yourself and it starts to come out, and blogging can be a very meaningful way to express yourself and to find people that are interesting and maybe feel the same way you do, or think the same way you do, or have similar beliefs. Sometimes our imagination opens up and it blooms like a flower. From this, we might be able to experience happiness and joy. My ride was pretty simple. Started out with complete and total burden, taking care of my mom. She was telling me all the time, "Get out. I don't need you. I don't want you here." I stumbled onto something I had read about years before, and what I started doing was, when my mom would start yelling at me, I started putting my arm around her. I put my head on her head, and I would just say to her, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm here, and I'm going to take care of you." She stopped saying it. And then as I started to become more successful as a blogger and as a caregiver, I started to feel really happy about my situation instead of all the burden. And I know a lot of you that want to be bloggers are feeling a lot of burden. Okay. And then I made the natural extension, and this can happen in life, because joy is a heightened state of happiness. And that's what happened to me. So I was able to derive power and purpose, purposefulness, meaningfulness in my life as a result of blogging, and you can do it too. But you have to try to think about some of the things I'm talking about. So, in order to win as a blogger, your efforts have to be meaningful and purposeful. Not just throwing a bunch of crap up on the wall, hoping that a bunch of people will come by and read it, and you'll become a celebrity. You have to think about this concept of meaning all the time. Success is what comes down the road. And of course, success can be defined in many ways. But if our efforts are meaningful and purposeful, success will come to us. There is no doubt about it. That's the way it happens. You can talk to people all the time. More or less, just the simple fact that the sun will go up in the morning, success will come to you, but you have to earn it through your efforts. Okay, I'm kind of at the end of this part. I already mentioned about you can get a $12 blog for a year. I want to reinforce the idea that the most important thing you need to do is build an email subscriber list. So you've got to have the ability to subscribe all over your blog. I don't mean all over. Mine usually comes up 2 or 3 times if you're on there, and it gives you a chance to subscribe. You have to build a subscriber list, because a really good subscriber, like the one I mentioned out in California that knew a whole bunch of people in support groups, you know, that is your target audience. That's your heads on target. So if you find somebody in a support group and they like what you're reading, well, then they're going to tell other people. Oh, I got a phone call, huh? I forgot to turn my phone off. It's the Kids Wish Network. I'll call them back. Oh, give me a break. Sorry about that, folks. It's real life deal here. Okay. I forgot to turn my phone off, obviously. So you want to think about the email list, and I'm trying to make this point strong to you, because if you get a target in the beginning, they'll bring you other people. Now, in my case, I'm 7.5 years in, and I want to just say to you that I've never spent any real money on advertising. I recently started doing some Facebook boosts, but that's it. So I depend on word of mouth, and I depend on social media. Fortunately, I was an early adopter of just about everything. A couple years ago, I won WEGO Health, Google Plus, best on Google Plus. I have a good initiative on Google Plus, pretty good on Facebook, about 23,000 followers, but the real followers, they're pretty good to me. I have 30,900 people or more now on my email. And of course, I get a pretty good amount of traffic from Google. You certainly need that in the beginning. You got to get some recognition in Google, so you have to write stuff that's good. Google will figure it out. When you write, here's another thing I learned. Some of the articles that I wrote that I thought were the greatest articles I ever wrote were duds. I couldn't believe it. Like hardly anybody read them. They clicked in, they clicked out. Some of the worst articles I wrote were the biggest winners. People loved them. So I learned as a blogger, don't kill yourself over each piece of content. Create some content. Put it up there. Don't agonize over it, because it might not do much today, and it might become the biggest winner you ever had a year or 2 from now, or it might take off today. But don't beat yourself up about it, especially when you're smaller. But you do get an idea on what you want to write about. Although I can tell you this, if after 7.5 years, people ask me all the time, if I knew how to write a winner every time, I would have been doing it. Somebody asked me a while back, why don't you do a viral video? And I said, I would do a viral video if I knew how to do it. And by the way, that's one of my goals for this year for the first time. I'm going to do a viral video. When I say viral, I don't mean 2 million views or something. I'm in Alzheimer's. If I can get a couple 100,000 views on a video, that'd be a big winner in my arena. Okay, so I'm done with this part, Kristen, and I'd be happy to answer questions that anybody has. I don't know if I went over or not. I forgot to put my watch out.
You did pretty good. You did great. I'm feeling very uplifted by a lot of those quotes and the messages, and, you know, deciding what your purpose is before you go into blogging. I think that's an incredible point that many people kind of sometimes look over because they're so excited and passionate to get out there. So thank you so much, Bob. We all enjoyed it. We do have a few questions that I want to jump into. Our first is from Jody, and she's asking, how important is the visual appeal of the blog? So she thinks it depends on, you know, the purpose and the intended audience, but do you have any insight as to how important the appeal is of the blog?
That is a phenomenal question from my point of view. I love it. if you go to my blog, I don't have that big picture at the top. And my friends always tell me you should get this new modern day kind of blog site they have now with the big picture and all this and all that. When I ask my readers, they all say, don't change anything. Now, I have a content site, and I started with the typical content thing where you've got all the content over here and some stuff on the sidebar and the thing on the top. My mind would say, if you got something that looks really good, like, what was I thinking? I looked at somebody's blog recently. It looked really nice. It was visually nice to me. But then as I started going down it, I was like confused. There was pictures all over the place, and I couldn't see what I wanted. So, Jody, that's a phenomenal question. I think the content is what is important, because if people come and they can read your blog easily, it's those people that are going to tell other people in the beginning, and that's really what you want. So I think content's important. But I argue with friends, I argue with people, and I do get a lot of people. I mean, I think my blog looks like a Model T Ford, like a 1920 Ford. But I get a lot of comments from people that send me and they say, I really love your blog. I love the way it looks. I'm pretty good on putting images in my articles, and that does help. You have to have a picture or an image. And if you look down the front page of my blog today at alzheimersreadingroom.com, you'll see I have one. It starts out big, and then I make it smaller after a couple of hours. I put a great big image in, and then I reduce it down. That's my answer.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Teresa's asking, she has a website with content, but she also blogs. Should she be separating her blog to a separate page?
Well, I mean, my blog is a website with the blog built into it. So I'm not exactly sure what she's saying. So I have a website, but I use the blogger as the whole section straight down. So it's it's like WordPress, except it's blogger. By the way, I would suggest you go to WordPress. I started, WordPress wasn't there, and I was going and going. If I had it started later, I would have definitely have used WordPress. And people say you can transfer everything over. I'm not going to do that. So basically, all my content is on the left, and it's big. And then on the sidebar, I have some ads over there and some things you can click to, and I have my information so you can search, because I have 5,000 articles. The key is, if you're going to a website and you're going to click the word blog to get to the content, that might be a bit of an impediment. And I know some people that I have gone to their website, and this would actually apply to a certain extent to WEGO. And to get to their blog, you have to look across the navigation bar. But, WEGO has its own vision and is trying to accomplish something. So I don't necessarily think that their main thing is the blog. If the blog is the meat and the potatoes, my answer is, then you've got to get on a blog. If a blog is a part of something else that's accomplishing something, you go with the nav bar, do whatever you want. But it makes it a little harder for people. When you go to my blog, Alzheimer's Reading Room, a couple words, add, here's your first article and the summary. You want to go read it, you click continue, and you get the whole blown article.
Great. Going off of that, kind of similar, Shane's asking, so on your blog right now, when you go to it, there's a preview of the post, and then when you click it, it brings up to its own full page. So what's the benefit of that? Why do you have it set up that way?
I have it that way for a very specific reason, and that is, some of my articles tend to be deep. And when I say deep, they might have 1,000 words. Frequently, they have 600-700 words. So if you think of what that's going to equal on a web page, and my style is, and I probably should have mentioned this a little bit ago, if you go down my article, you'll read, but if I have other articles that are related to what I'm saying, I'll put in a link. So it might say what to do when an Alzheimer's patient is mean, because I'm talking about meanness in a different context. So you can click and you can go find the other content on that topic as you go down. So what I'm saying is, so my articles would tend to be long. So if I put the full article on the front page and I only had 4 there, I mean, you'd be going a long way before you got to the bottom. So I try to make it like a snapshot, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. The next, below the fourth article, it says older post. If you click that, 1, 2, 3, 4. That design seems to work pretty well for me. I know there are plenty of people, you can go straight down their blog and just keep reading and reading. I don't think people who are older, and my audience scales, like, I have a lot of people 35 to, like, say 50, but it scales older, and I think they're more likely to enjoy my style where they can pick and click through rather than go down and down and down and down. Like I said, you got 15 seconds. I'm hoping in the first 15 seconds, the first or second article headline grabs the attention of the person that came there. If you do come from search, you will get one article on one great big long page. That's my homepage I'm describing. I think that's what Sean's asking about. I believe in the summary and getting your homepage driving people into your site.
Yes, and I think with 3 posts a day, if you listed them all, yeah, people would be scrolling forever. So definitely probably the best bet with how you have it set up right now. Tom is asking if there's a better template, one over another, for improving search optimization, and getting advertisers, or is it really dependent on the content that you're pushing out?
Okay, you said Tom, right?
Yes.
Tom, I'm an SEO idiot. I've hired people to help me with SEO. I get emails constantly every day from people at Samald and all these crazy places telling me my SEO sucks. And I've tried everything I can do. I always tell people, I'm not dumb, I'm old. So when it comes to SEO, I am kind of dumb and old, but if I had been younger, maybe I would know more about it. In my case, my SEO may not be very good, but the content is important because Google's using an algorithm. You can kind of add things to some of your articles. Like, one of the things I sometimes do, if I write an article about meaning and purpose, I may down the bottom define meaning and purpose, and that helps Google see it. One of the things that helps your articles, I always include a subheading right at the top underneath the heading, and in HTML, I don't even know what this means. I put H2 rounded in brackets on both sides, and that tells Google it's a subheading. And then if I have another subheading down the page, I'll do the same thing. I noticed that that's what comes up in Google, and that helps Google understand better what your content is really about. It's deeper than just the keywords that are in your article. It helps them identify. And I have been getting more articles that are starting to get highlighted at the top of Google. For example, if you type in, can you die from Alzheimer's? A lot of the times you're going to get Google featuring my article, sometimes on what is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia. I don't know if I'm giving you a good answer or not. I would try the subheading, I think, is important. And if you find an SEO guru, email me, because I've paid a few of them and it hasn't made any difference.
SEO can be a whole nother world. I totally get you on that. We have time for one more question. You talked about, finding the difference between what readers need versus what they want. Do you have any insight or process of how you find this need rather than the want?
Yes. You try to create comments, or you invite people in your article to email you by asking a question. Does this happen to you? Or did this happen to you? Or what would you do? So you try to create feedback. Some of the stuff is obvious, and it wasn't obvious to me in the beginning, but it is now. How to get a patient to take the medication, how to get them to take a shower, because communication becomes a real problem in Alzheimer's. And certainly if you were in cancer or something and the person is coherent, you don't have that issue as much. So I think it's kind of like you're the camel, they'll lead you to the water, see what they're asking or talking about, take a drink, and then go ahead and write about it. So I think that's how you find out more about the one side of the coin. Like I said, my readers, one thing they want is they want to know how to solve these problems, like medication, take a medication, etc. But what they really need is they need a lot of support and letting them know. I have articles like, well, I have an article on purpose and meaning, the power of purpose in your life. I have articles on emotional superglue, which is another one of my terms that the readers really need, because they don't always understand when the Alzheimer's patient is following them around all the time. It tries to drive them crazy. It's because the Alzheimer's patient, there's one person in the world that they love the most, and that's their caregiver. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about this. So they start to stick to them like glue. But I can tell you from caregivers I know that have done this for a long time, after the loved one goes away, or like in the case of my mom, they love them like crazy. And the reason is because over time they got attached by an emotional superglue. That's a little off the topic, but writing about things that, you know, can help the psychology or the emotion of your audience, or real life examples like, you know, that you can get from your readers, can really help you out a lot.
Yeah, I think well said, beautifully said. So with that, I just want to thank everyone for coming. Well, I was going to say coming out, but I guess for joining the webinar tonight, more like it, from your home or office. We really appreciate everyone. We're going to be having more webinars coming from excellent hosts just like Bob. So a big thank you to Bob. We really appreciate sharing your insights. I know I'm feeling a little inspired to go blog, so I hope you guys are all too tonight. And I hope you all have a good night.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Thank you, Kristen.
Yeah, bye-bye.